So welcome to Breakout Workshop C, Language Programs, Increasing Capacity to Support Non-Traditional Language Learning. Hopefully you're in the right room. My name is Jennifer Cummins, and I'm the Settlement Language Coordinator at AMSA for only one more week, and then somebody else is taking over for me. I'd like to welcome our speakers today. We have them up at the table here, Sandia Guy and Jill Berezowski from Mosaic, and Jill McFeeters from Diversity Community Resources Society. Each presentation by our speakers today will be followed by a short Q&A session. After both presentations and Q&A sessions, if we have time, which we won't, because we're starting a little late, we will have a short discussion about the information presented today. But of course, the speakers are around, and I'm sure that some people have approached you already to discuss some of the very interesting things that they have to share. We'd like to thank our funder, IRCC, for funding this event. It's been really great so far. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our two speakers. Sandia Guy has an MA in English and an MA in Adult Education. She's a Link instructor, PBLA lead teacher, and instructional developer in English language learning centers at Mosaic in Vancouver, BC. Her 18 years of experience includes teaching ESL, Link, English for Work, SELP, and Explore. For the past 1 year, she has been teaching employment and literacy programs to Syrian refugees. Jill Berezowski received her bachelor's degree in political science and Middle Eastern history in 1991, and her TESOL diploma in 1999, as she's been teaching ever since. She's passionate about teaching and has been particularly excited to be part of Mosaic's enhanced literacy class, as it combines two interests of hers, literacy and the challenges faced by refugees arriving in Canada. So two very well qualified speakers, and you can take it away.
Hello, everyone. For those who don't know, Mosaic is a full-service settlement organization, and we have been operating for over 40 years now with 300 staff members, 450 volunteers, and 32 sites across Metro Vancouver, and it's still growing. Mosaic offers a settlement programs, language, employment, children and family programs, specialized family programs, interpretation, and translation. Please, for more information on our programs and services, please visit our website. And over to Jill.
Sorry. Hi. So, I'm an instructor at Mosaic, and I'm going to talk today a little bit about the Enhanced Literacy Program in Burnaby. And Sandy is going to talk about the Family Literacy Program in Surrey. So when we started, we were sort of trying to fill gaps, like a lot of people are. One of the gaps we certainly noticed was literacy, like pre-benchmark. We had students in programs who were in level 1, but dropping out because it was too difficult. So there was a lack of literacy in Burnaby. I'm sure you all know there's always lack of childcare. Childcare for particularly for Syrian refugees, some of which have bigger families. You might be able to get one space in a LINK program, one childcare space, but getting 2 or 3 can be really challenging. And then also babies. We all know that the LINK program usually starts with 18 months to 6 years. So the way that I like to think of it is that, if you had a baby a year for a couple of years, you could be unable to access a class for 5, 6, 7 years. So we are looking to fill that gap. And also settlement support in the sense that we know that, people are coming from Syria and refugees in general have a lot of culture shock and potentially trauma, a lot of settlement needs. And I also would like to thank our funder, IRCC. Yes. So, sorry, I'm going to keep going. So the Enhanced Literacy Program, there is one instructor, which is me, 4 fabulous volunteers, Fatia from Lebanon, Charles from South Sudan, one from Canada, and another one from Turkey, Mo from Turkey, and Megumi from Canada. So we had lots of volunteers. And we also had 1 day a week as settlement worker. So this was good to try to address the ongoing settlement issues. Also, we had childcare provided by Burnaby Family Life. And I was really thrilled that they had an Arabic-speaking childcare worker, because I could totally see the relief on the women's faces when they were trying to, hand over their children to someone they didn't know. And just to be able to talk to that person, I think, made a big difference. And also, all of our students had transportation assistance both ways every day. And I don't think most of them would have been able to make it without that. The outcomes for us, where we were trying to overcome the barriers to accessing language training, childcare, and transportation. Of course, we're trying to provide a safe and supportive environment. But particularly, this was a literacy class, so everyone in the class had less than 10 years of formal education. The average was probably 3 or 5 years of education, and there were 3 students with no education in any language at all. So those people are, trying to learn a new language and learn literacy skills at the same time. We're trying to follow up on that. And then we had the settlement worker who was there once a week. She was able to do wonderful things. I told the story before, but my very first day in the class, I was listening to 2 students speak in Arabic, and they were talking food bank, talking link. And what I understood very quickly, and got the help of the settlement worker, was that this particular student needed food. And he was learning from the other student. He'd only been in Canada for 2 months. And he was learning from the other student that there was a place that you could get food, the food bank. And because she was there and I was there, and it all worked out really great, we had the paperwork, we had the map, and he was off to get his food bank card, like the very next day. I also asked the class at that time, does anybody else need food? 4 people said yes. So I was so happy on that day just to be able to take care of that first thing. Oh yes, and the last thing was that I had 4 volunteers in this class. The level was foundations to 4, which there's no way I could possibly do that on my own. And we had some extra funding for this class, which was really great. I had some time to do some development for myself. And to try, I didn't train the volunteers, but I would teach them how to do a particular activity, do it this way or do it that way, or this is what I'd like you to do today. So we had a little extra time, and so I hope we increased their ability to be effective in the class.
Okay, thanks, Jill. I'll talk about Surrey. And in Surrey, we felt that there was a need for integrated services for family settlement. And our staff from Settlement, Language, and Family Services came up with this project that you see up here, and it's a team effort from all settlement, family, and language programs. Today I'll talk about the literacy classes that I teach, but we also offer all the other programs as well. So the idea behind this project was to support 30 refugee families, identify their needs, and provide services based on those needs. The goal of this project is to have a community-based kind of action research approach to identify needs and address them as they emerge. So we have evolved these programs over time. And our program is funded also by IRCC, so we thank them for that. We have one link instructor, that's me, a classroom assistant, an early childhood educator, child minding volunteer, and Arabic-speaking settlement worker. So all 5 of us work together to support our clients, and we have 8 mothers with children 0 to 6. coming in. We started with twice a week. The program started Wednesdays and Fridays from 9:30 to 12. So the first 2 hours, mothers would be in the literacy class with the link instructor and the classroom assistant, while the children are in the daycare with ECE and the volunteer. And for the last half hour, we get together for the family literacy time where the child and the parent are together, working on activities, songs. We have snack time. So I plan the class topics and themes in collaboration with our ECE. So if I'm teaching food, she makes sure she does the same kind of language with the children while they're there with her, or whatever topic we are working in class, we try to collaborate. And the needs assessment is done on an ongoing basis with the help of the CA in class. The outcomes for this program are to provide the high needs newcomers and their children with integrated services, and the focus is on family settlement. So we provide childcare, transportation assistance, and referrals. We started with this program with women only earlier, but now in our second phase, because it started in October last year, and it's going to end this March. So we started with women only and children with 18 months to 6 years, but we adapted it because of the demand, and we also increased a day. Now we have 3 days a week, and we are offering this program. And of course, another very important outcome is to increase their confidence in using English by participating in the literacy classes. And over to Joe.
We had many challenges. We also had many successes. For us, the intake process was very challenging. We didn't have the usual link processes, and so different settlement workers from all over were sending students. It was kind of funny. People were like dropping in, like they'd walk by the door and they'd go, "Can I come and join?" And I spent with one student, I think we probably, for the first day, I was teaching her to spell her name wrong because she didn't know how to spell it. And anyway, so we didn't have some of those processes, which would have been easier. It was more of a literacy stream. So we had foundations level to level 4 in speaking, reading, writing, and listening. It was quite high. Or quite varied, but everybody had some degree of literacy issue, or they had interrupted education or limited education. We did have, I did sometimes have, I don't know if it's really a challenge, but, sometimes people just weren't quite ready. Like the student would be in class and they just weren't quite ready to be there in the class, doing whatever it was I was asking them to do. And the one story I sort of like to tell is that we sat at a table like this on the little picture, and we had another table which, when we separated into groups, we would start together and then separate to deal with the multi-level. And one student, she just wouldn't come. She wouldn't come and sit with the group, and I would invite her, and I would get some translation. And in the end, I sort of decided it doesn't really matter exactly why. This is where she is right now, and that's where I'll start with her. And if she's ready, she'll come and join us when she's ready. She never did, actually. She stayed there, and a volunteer would go help her. And I think she learned something, but she just was not in a place to come and join the group. Some of the successes were, we laughed about this before, babies in the classroom is both a success and a challenge. Right? So we have 4 months old babies up to about 13 months. So I like the babies, they're so cute. And I get to carry them around a little bit. But, this is a success because those women would not be in class otherwise. It's a challenge because it's harder for them to study if they're trying to also take care of their baby. If we could extend childcare to younger ages, that would be great. So I guess it kind of goes in both places, a success and a challenge. So the other success, was the integration, I thought, of volunteers. I had some extra time to spend with them, so I was able to kind of teach them how to do things. Like I just, one example was getting the volunteers to draw the directionality lines. Like they know how to do it, but they didn't think of it unless I showed it to them. So if we had a few minutes to do that kind of thing, then they could help me make the activities and they could help the students better. We used Arabic. We had Arabic-speaking volunteers. We had Arabic-speaking settlement worker. And I really think this made it possible for me to address needs as they came up quickly, like the food bank. And, anecdotally, it was a great experience for me. And, I had one student tell me the other day that when he goes out now, he's just starting to read a little bit of the stuff around him. And another student who was, foundations level, she can spell her name in English. It's not always fast, but I think these small successes are wonderful.
Thank you, Jill. I'll talk about Surrey. We had quite a few challenges, but we kind of tried to overcome and get there. So the most important one that we had in the first term was student retention. So students would exit the program for various reasons. It could be health or family responsibilities, other commitments. I had 3 pregnant women at that time ready to deliver, so they exit the program, and then it's another chain reaction of issues that you have to do continuous intake and then go over the whole process again. The next 2 that I'm going to mention, diverse needs, which really make the process strenuous, and multi-level class. So creating lessons for these kind of classes are quite demanding. And these 2 challenges are not new. We see those challenges in any LINC classroom or any ESL classroom. But I feel that they become far more challenging when one end of your spectrum is literacy, right? So if we have literacy to LINC 3, and with diverse needs, here I want to learn about health, or I want to learn about Canadian geography, and there are 2 students trying to struggle how to write A or write their name. So it's good to have volunteers to support, but still having one teacher in the classroom with all these needs makes it quite challenging. And as Jill mentioned, babies in the classroom can be a success as well, because you're providing services to students or clients who cannot have access to these kind of services. But as a teacher or in an organization or a school, it can be a classroom management, a challenge to manage your classroom. Babies don't know how to behave in class. They're not taught, and we don't know what's going on with them. So. And if you are a parent, you would know there are days when they behave and there are days when we really don't know what's going on. So I had 3 babies in the classroom with big strollers sitting on the side. So it was quite challenging for me. But I do have some successes to share as well. I felt that we are towards the end of our program now, and I do feel that there is an increased community awareness. We did a few field trips. I took them to Save on Foods, to library for story time. And I forgot to mention that we also adapted our program to include men. So earlier we only had women, and then when they started requesting, can I bring my brother along, can I bring my husband along, because they have huge families. So I said, yeah, why not? So we had the whole family in the classroom, and especially with our half-hour literacy time where we were all together, and we used to go on our field trips together as well. So it really, and they know now that they can go to the library on their own, and there are 9 libraries in Surrey, and they can go to any for their story time or other activities that are offered there. And I feel that with increased awareness comes autonomy. They feel confident, some confidence. At this level, I wouldn't say that they're, ready to go out there, but at least they have the confidence to meet new people, greet, or just do the basic things, meeting their doctor with more confidence. And with that comes satisfaction and appreciation. So we see that our students are really, really grateful, and they expressed that in many different ways. So we added a new day because they really wanted it. Another day, so we run it 3 days a week now. And also, just every class, they don't want to end it. Can we spend a little bit more time? Like, is it already 12? Or, just their smiles, they just say it all. Sometimes those little tears of joy in their eyes with appreciation of what we all do, they just say it all.
So to just quickly sort of address some of the barriers of language acquisition for refugees, it's my opinion, but in my opinion, when you have this kind of need, big settlement needs, literacy needs, and the possibility of trauma or coming from a traumatic experience, I think everybody needs time. Time to go slowly, time to repeat the material, time to go outside of the classroom and take care of that doctor's appointment. I have to be a little bit faster, but my own story was that I had in my life about 6-7 years ago experienced 2 traumatic events that were quite life-changing. And it's taken me 6-7 years to get to be about that third person to get to be about here. And so I just think that we cannot ask people, in my opinion, to go quickly. We just need to give them time.
Thanks, Jill. Well, I feel that barriers for refugees are language acquisition barriers, especially for the refugees, are far more than any other second language learners. And in my students in particular, I felt that health and wellness was a big one. So they would just go like this, or, they would try to express it in many different ways. They wouldn't have the language, and then my CA would kind of try to translate that for me. Sometimes they would say, I have a severe headache, or I don't know why I feel like crying, I feel sad. So there's so much going on in their lives, and they have drastically changed, that we need to give them time, as she mentioned. And another thing that ties in well with health and wellness is readiness level. When you don't feel good, you don't feel ready to learn anything new in life at that point. So they would say, I can't do this right now. I just spoke to my family member in Syria this morning, and what I heard wasn't pleasant. I can't even share that with you. So I can't focus. Can I go out of the class? So those are kind of the questions that we have to keep in mind. Family responsibilities. We know that they have huge families. Sometimes they have old parents with them, so I need to go home, take care of my mother. I need to take my child to the dentist. So those doctor appointments take a lot of time as well. Culture shock is not new. We've heard our international ESL students talking about that all the time. But I especially feel with this group, it is really a big shock. It's an entirely different culture. Just like small activities doing in the morning when you're doing a greeting circle. I've never done that before. I never shook hands with another male. Or I was never asked to come out and stand in front of a group and talk about myself or present. So I've never done that, so it's difficult for me. Okay? Jill?
So for the best promising practices, I thought that there's really a 2-pronged approach. One is to support instructors. I took these points from the ESL for Adult Literacy All, so I didn't create them myself. Number 1 is just really you need an instructor who has a solid understanding of literacy. Number 2, you need to support the delivery of ESL literacy training that accommodates the diverse needs of learners. Instructors need training, and hopefully the instructor is adaptable, supportive, and knowledgeable. That's I hope. The reason I took these is because this program was not a link program. It was only 10 weeks, but there was some extra funding for development and for training and for the training of the volunteers. And I had twice as much prep time as I would normally have. So I was able to design, create 4 different levels of activity to accommodate everyone in the class. I was able to respond to needs. I was able to learn and teach myself. I was able to go to workshops on trauma and different things like that. So I really think supporting instructors is very important. I also believe that for teachers, instructors supporting learners, it is a good idea to recognize, if you can, what trauma might look like in your classroom. I'll just go quickly here, but irritability, anger, depression, anxiety, these are all signs of trauma. Gaps in memory, difficulty focusing, difficulty organizing, demands for undivided attention. And what I just want to say is that that looks a lot like a kind of non-cooperative bad student, right? That you could sort of swap them out almost. So I really think that if we need to look for the signs of trauma, but we also need to accommodate. We need to make some, accommodations. So for me, in my classroom, I relaxed the rules, lateness and absenteeism. I also tried really hard not to apply extra pressure for people who are already under a lot of pressure. I didn't want to go quickly. I repeated, I reviewed, I recycled. I tried to keep it interesting. I tried to keep people moving. I tried to make it tactile. I just was sort of trying to be prepared to be flexible as things came up. Like the woman who didn't want to join the group. She also wasn't willing to send her son to daycare, even though he was 4 years old. And I thought, it's okay, he can stay here, right? So just to be flexible when things arise.
All right, thank you. Well, I have a few suggestions for the coordinators here, because you've seen our Surrey project is huge. It's a combination of settlement, family, services, and language. So it's really important to have a strong support system in place to overcome challenges as they emerge, because the program really needs to be in good hands, right? It is really important to have team effort so that you can provide, you can address the ongoing needs and adapt your programs diligently and efficiently. And I think the key here is to have a well-knit support system with very, very clear communication. For language teachers, I would say that teaching refugees does require a lot more than a TESOL diploma or a master's degree in any field. I think it calls for passion, it calls for empathy, it calls for humaneness. When I first started teaching refugees a year ago, I still feel that it's an entirely unique experience. Sometimes I feel that I don't have the skills required to perform well, and at times I feel that this is the most rewarding job ever. So when I started, I used to plan, those fancy CLB-aligned lesson plans or with perfect lesson objectives, and would go into a classroom ready with all those materials. But it didn't work that way. I could not teach as planned, It was very hard for me to keep them engaged in the learning process. It took me a while to understand. I was struggling between teaching and counseling, and later I understood that I had to apply a different approach. So I still have my CLB-aligned lesson plans, but I have tried to limit my objectives. I've learned how to do more with less. There's no need to overwhelm the students with too much language, too much information. All I need to do is to just go with the flow and just provide a welcoming environment. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Sanya and Jill. And for the sake of time, we have time for about 2 or 3 questions from the crowd here. And our friendly volunteer has a microphone, and she's going to come around and hand it to you. Please speak your question into the microphone, and the panelists will answer for you.
I commend you both
really. You're doing fantastic work. You made a joke here at the end about CLB aligned lesson plans, but in our new reality, we are going to be obviously working under PBLA. How are you going to do that, or how do you see being able to do this in a PBLA setting?
Well, I guess we need a lot of support for that. We need a lot of support for that, and it's a different mindset. PBLA is not just your planning, it is a two-way process. The student also needs to know that they're a part of this process. So I think needs assessment with a group that's not aware of, or goal setting with a different background. These are very Western concepts. So we need a lot of support to get this going, and
Especially with the multi-level piece that you
Multi-level
said,
pieces
and
as well.
having
Yeah.
like a pre-lit
yeah.
up to level 4 under the PBLA umbrella.
Yes.
I don't know. That's going to be tough.
It is going to be.
Yeah.
Jill?
I don't know. Can you hear? So my class is hopefully going to be more of a foundations level, not so varied in April. So for that, it should be a little bit easier. But I think the goals, the goal is to get the papers in the binder.
Yeah.
I don't know about the assessment. Like, I don't know how that's going to go over, because I don't.
Skill using and
Yeah.
that kind of thing still.
Yeah, but I think there's a long way for them to go. They don't have to do a goal setting today. They have time to do it.
Thank you very much.
Something we've discovered, most of us have, you go to a doctor and they've got a good sort of bedside manner. A lot of us were developing sort of a desk side manner. I don't know if any of us were expecting what we've experienced in the last year, but we've had everything from wonderfully ecstatic, great, good news. We had 2 twins born the other day. So we often joke about being in the business of new Canadians. You don't get newer than that. We've also had an outburst in class that literally scared the hell out of everybody. But coming here, proud to be with you all. And I know when we go back up to the interior, I feel really fortunate up there because we have many ways that we can experiment with pilots like this. We've got a lot of volunteers. And I see here in the city, again, I commend you all because the numbers you're dealing with, amazing. So sorry, no question.
Tammy has a question, and then we'll move on.
I guess my question is for you, Sandhya. You talked about the family literacy program, and you said at first you only had women in the group, and I manage a program that's women only. And then you said you started having men in the group too. I'm just curious if you could tell us how it changed the dynamic and what were the challenges or successes with each different model.
Yes. Well, there were a lot of requests coming from our students for their husbands or brothers. So we didn't want to ignore those requests because it was a family program. So we didn't want it to, we didn't want to have it just for moms. But we did have issues initially because we would just experience what Jill was saying. Those 2 men would just sit on another table, and even if I tried to pair them up with another partner, it just wouldn't work. Or just having a greeting circle in the morning, shaking hands with another woman or another man was quite challenging. And then I had to adapt, right? I had to just let it go. It's okay. You don't have to. Maybe you could sit with your wife or your sister, and another person can join you, and that's how I kind of tried to work it out. Yeah.
Thank you. Sounds like a very flexible, innovative program. That's very interesting. You said it started in October.
Yeah.
And you said it was continuous intake.
Yeah, because some of our students quit the program. As I told you, 3 of the women were pregnant at the moment.
So could a student be in the program for as long as they wanted, or was there a end time?
Yeah, the end time is the March. So we got the funding for 6 months.
I see. Okay. And how does it work in conjunction with other programs like LINK or the MAP program, for example?
Yeah, because my classroom assistant is also a settlement worker. So whatever needs that emerge, and everything is just shared. It's all under one roof. So their husbands are in an employment program, which is also offered at Mosaic. So they all come together from 9 to 12. The children in the child care, and women in our program, men in the employment, those men who are not high enough to be in an employment program, want to be in the literacy program, they join us. So they're all there under one roof getting all the services they need. And the youth comes in the evening for the young after-school programs for supporting them with homework or media. We've started Media Minds, so it's also going well. So there's a lot of support for the group. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. The next presenter I'd like to introduce is Crystal McFeeters from Diversity Community Resources Society.
Thanks. Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm Crystal, and I'm in the Moving Ahead program. And I believe some of you know about the Moving Ahead program, but my feeling is that people outside the Lower Mainland might not have a full understanding of it. So just a little background about that might be helpful. Moving Ahead program, well, I guess probably came out of some of the gaps that Jill and Sandhya talked about when you have people who are more multi-barriered, who need more support. So while you two deal with Syrians, the Moving Ahead program is broader perspective. So it deals with the vulnerable immigrant population program. A lot of them are Syrians, but they do come from other countries, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, a lot of African countries. And it's also wraparound services, which is really quite wonderful and quite unique. I know from being a Link instructor for over 20 years, you could see a lot of need. A lot of clients come with more than language needs, and some of them are quite more severe. So in the Moving Ahead program, the clients meet with a counselor. They're assigned a counselor. They're called Moving Ahead counselors, who work with often the whole family, and in their first language. They'll do home visits. There's workshops, and there's also counseling available. And then as well, I do the literacy portion. So if a client in the Moving Ahead program wants to join the program, they join the literacy program. So it's just available to them, Moving Ahead clients. So that's a little background on Moving Ahead. So what are the literacy programs I do? Well, they're Moving Ahead program Literacy and Essential Skills workshops, and they're called workshops because it's not a traditional classroom model, and we'll get into that a little bit more. It does offer a structured, supportive, very sensitive environment. When these are vulnerable immigrants, a lot of them come in with, again, multi-barriered and a lot of perhaps trauma or mental health issues are some of the things that might be present. I give them startup material. They're not prepared often for a classroom setting, so they have a binder with dividers to help organize the material I give them, and then just the usual tools, pens, pencils, sharpeners, erasers, that kind of thing. There is, as much as we can do in the classroom, targeted language support. Since the time I've been doing this, I've had, I don't know, probably over 100 volunteers. They come and go, right? I usually have a pool of about 20 at a time, and we aim to try to get some of the targeted languages in the classroom. There's also transportation support, the same as with your program, with 2 tickets a day, so they can come and go. And also child minding, we have in the afternoon class for age 3 months to 6 years. Although it's a small child minding, it is ECE. We need more as well. And why is this program necessary? I guess this kind of alternative classroom space. There's so many issues why. There's so many reasons why students that come just are not ready to access a structured classroom and the rigorous demands for attendance that we have now in Link. With the huge wait lists, as we all know, good attendance is a must. You have to be on time. You need to be present. So a lot of them that would just have no other alternative for a structured classroom setting beyond, say, conversation circles. And a lot of that just won't work for a lot of them if they have no literacy skills at all, no language at all. So I've seen pretty much all of these issues in my class, a lot of trauma, obviously, different cognitive style, which is kind of interesting. When I do goal setting, some of them specifically will say the approach that they want. Some of the higher ones are much more academically focused, and they would like to do a lot more structured grammar, perhaps, that they found weren't in other Link classrooms or they don't find in conversation classrooms. Sexual orientation, they might have had trauma around that, they might just be coming out now and still have a lot of anxiety about that, so they need a more sensitive environment to deal with that. And mental health issues, low self-esteem. I've seen classroom anxiety, and then large families with complex issues that draw them away from the classroom and their ability to attend regularly. So overall, we could say there's not a one-stop shopping that I think that can just meet everyone's needs, and diverse learning environments, or the lack of, will affect learners, their attitudes towards the classroom and themselves in the classroom, their self-esteem if they feel they're not fitting into a classroom and there's nothing for them there, and their achievements if they're able to meet any of their literacy goals. They're not if they don't have a setting that meets their needs. So how do we do this at diversity is the question. It's quite challenging, as you can imagine. What kind of a setup would work? Different environments, I think, have tried different approaches when you have multi-level. I've been doing this for a number of years, and I did try many different models, researched many different models. I'd been in multi-level classrooms before as a link teacher, but I found that it just really didn't work in this classroom to do station work or to do different group work. So the model I came upon was to go back a little bit upon intake. When a student comes in, sometimes they've been to the assessment center and they have their CLBs, and that's very helpful. But sometimes they don't. So I just sit down and meet with them. I can generally assess them quite quickly. So I was a link teacher for 20 years. I think I can assess them sometimes better than the assessment centers sometimes when they come in with. Just experience shows a lot. So I will assess not just their language level, but their gaps in learning, their needs, their goals. So we set language learning goals for them specifically for each individual. It might be settlement-based, that they might have a settlement issue, or it might be their cognitive style or their particular interests. So some might want to just work on grammar, some might want to learn the alphabet. Some might need to learn more about doctors if they have a lot of health issues. So I design individual learning plans around those for each learner, and we employ volunteer teaching assistants to help the students with one-on-one. Probably the best model if you think of it almost like tutoring. It's very one-on-one, and then we have all the targeted languages that we try to get. So if you can imagine in the classroom, there's a lot of one-on-one going on. Each student has a binder that's divided into different sections, and I put numbers on each of them, and I move those numbers every day so they know, the volunteers know, number 1 we start here, we work on that a little bit, go through to number 2, so they're meeting all the language needs that they need across the board. It's not just speaking, it might be a variety of listening or grammar or writing, whatever they need. Sometimes there's a little bit of group work if they're similar levels and they want to do dialogue practice. We also have a computer lab if the level is appropriate. For pre-lit and literacy, I don't find it's really that helpful. There's a little bit of phonics work they could do. And then the goal is to get them to be more autonomous learners and able to move in towards a classroom setting where they have a bit more independence. So the literacy and essential skills outcome model, would be essentially kind of a link prep class is one way you could look at it, and a literacy success. We have 2 classes. They run 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, 2 hours in the morning, and another class 2 hours in the afternoon. They're both similar to kind of link ideas. They promote, facilitate literacy skills across the board. It's a very highly supportive learning environment, and the goal is to reduce anxiety and to promote self-efficiency. A lot of them need a lot of one-on-one support in the beginning, and then we try to get them to understand their own learning styles and needs and how to work independently. So it's a transition period, so they'll be more successful once they're ready to enter Link. And just like Link, using real life, meaningful context for the individual, they might bring in something specifically for that individual that they want to work on. They also develop self-assessment and goal-setting skills as I meet with them, sometimes monthly. It might sometimes even be every 2 or 3 months, because sometimes their progress is very slow if their attendance is poor due to multiple issues, or if they have low literacy skills, that might be very slow. And then also they increase awareness of their own individual learning styles, because we do review their material and review their goals, set new goals. I'll just kind of briefly go through this. I think the community impact, they have increased capacity for connection, social skills. They network with other participants, might be from the same country, shared experiences. And similar to LINK, they get information about settlement-related issues. Basically, the main concept is that multi-buried refugees can obtain really the basic literacy skills they need to move in towards independence, where otherwise they might just fall through the cracks, and in order to transition to other programs. The program impact, you could say, would be trifold with the instructors, learners, and the volunteers. So as an instructor, it's been interesting me to really, and quite a pleasant surprise, co-facilitating with volunteers. I've met a lot of just wonderful people who really are looking for an opportunity to give back. And embracing more individualized lessons. It's a whole other concept. I haven't seen really anyone else doing this, and I'd love to hear, but if anyone knows anyone else who's doing anything like this, it's just something I kind of came up with on my own after trying multiple approaches, and I know students really positive feedback with that. So the learners get increase their confidence, their attitude, their self-esteem, with the sensitivity in the classroom, and of course their speaking and reading levels, comprehension, and increased connection to volunteers and their peers. A lot of them get quite attached to the volunteers. So the volunteers could either be like Canadians, the often seniors I have who seem to be some of the best volunteers. Some of them are new immigrants themselves, who are just more educated and have higher English levels, and that's a chance to connect to other people who they see are successful. And then peers, again, who share similar background issues. And then the volunteers, I really see from the volunteers, they really love coming in there. They really get a sense of feedback. They're autonomous in working independently with each student, which I think they really like that sense of autonomy, and that they can really help in a more direct and personalized way. They also gain awareness about newcomers' own aspirations and goals, and I've had volunteers who've gained Canadian work experience for future employment. I've had, and these were all especially immigrants themselves, I've had one who went on to be an instructor in a LINK program, one who's working with the school board, and then one who's working with another immigrant service society. So a lot of them have gained valuable Canadian work experience. The challenges, being multi-leveled, I have 16 lesson plans a day to work on, so that can take some time. This program, I am an instructor/coordinator, so I do have the hours in there. A lot of people think that sounds rather overwhelming, but it's not as bad as it sounds, because I get a binder of material, they kind of work through it, and I add when I see it's needed. Maintaining a pool of volunteers, luckily I have someone who does that for me. I more schedule their time in, but volunteers come and go a lot. As I said, 100, 200, I don't know how many I've had. It's been a lot since 2012. Of course, attendance barriers is an issue, which is why there's more flexibility in attendance for this program. There could be undiagnosed learning disabilities, which you cannot diagnose unless it's done in their first language. So hence they are forever undiagnosed, so it's hard to tell if it's that or trauma or mental health issues. And then child minding, we've talked about, is always an ongoing problem. The Syrians I've had in my program in particular, some are very well educated. We've seen our speakers today. We see some who are quite educated. They all had quite high levels of English. The ones that come into my program have low literacy levels. We'd call them pre-lit, so they can't, a lot of them aren't able to read and write in their first language. They've had absolutely no exposure to education. Trauma, of course, affects learning, so, I just find a lot of sensitivity around that, and patience, though, you can overcome it, as long as there's the awareness is there. All the issues with large families, health issues. Surprisingly, I saw a lot of cancer, so I did my own research into that, and I guess a lot of Syrians in particular, these were all from the Syrians actually, I guess there's a lot of long waits before they come to Canada, a lot of time spent in camps where cancer might have started but they weren't unable to get treatment, or is extremely expensive. I think it's $1,000, $2,000 for one round of chemo, so they just wouldn't be able to treat their cancer. So I've had students die from cancer in my program. I've had families with children with cancer. I just see it a lot. It's quite surprising. And then, of course, we need more Arabic language support, like everyone does lately. Successes, most go on to work or other community programs. They do gain confidence in their ability to learn. They can meet their individualized goals, which is rewarding for them. And then they make connections with volunteers and other learners. Then the volunteers, of course, they get a lot of skills, connection, relationship building. They can find work. They use their own individual strengths and abilities. And then if they have a second language, then that's something very useful, and it's a real bonus. I would say the best practices probably for the vulnerable immigrant population program, for the success in this program is, and the uniqueness of it, is to assess the individual strengths and gaps in their learning. So it's not really a group approach. Create individual literacy plans for each learner to be inclusive, adaptive, it's quite flexible, and to recognize that individual support is instrumental for many of these individuals for reducing the barriers that they face. Okay, and then we're done. Thanks. Sure.
Thank you, Crystal, for that great presentation. And now we have a few minutes to take some questions and comments. So the volunteer, again, will come around with a microphone. Please make sure you're speaking into the microphone so that we can capture it on camera.
I appreciate what you were saying about the individualized action plans, because I noticed that if the information is relevant, of course, people absorb the language much more readily. And so I think that allows that. And yeah, sort of a simple comment. But anyway, I think a good idea to take forward into different settings.
Right. No, I've certainly seen that's the drive to really focus, that they really recognize a strong need in some areas, and they'll come with that strong, like, passion, I need this right now. So certainly, I know sometimes that's one of the drawbacks, perhaps, you know, in a whole classroom setting, is that sometimes I saw as a Link instructor myself, they might be saying, why are we learning about talking to children in the school, talking to children's teachers in the school, because I don't have children, right? So we have to explain, yes, well, we're trying to hit everyone's needs. So that's been interesting for me, seeing that. So that's a good comment, I'd say, yeah.
Hi, thank you for that. For all of the participants on the panel, I wasn't quite clear. Are both of your programs or all of your programs continuing in the next round of funding?
Well, I can say for moving ahead, it's been in place at Diversity since 2012. Like anything funding-based, right? I mean, we're assuming that it's going forward with at the same funding level. That's what we know right now.
Okay.
Just like Link is as well. So as far as we know, it is continuing.
Okay. How
I'm not
about the
sure
other?
about-
Yeah, we have sent in our proposals, and we're still waiting.
Okay.
And if we do get the funding, they will.
Yeah, because I know there was some extra funding for specifically for Syrians, and that seems to have disappeared off the table. Although we still have lots of Syrians here, so I'm not quite sure of the rationale. But anyway.
Yeah.
You mentioned a binder with
Yes.
16 lesson plans a
The
day.
binder,
Um,
yes.
Is this something you developed over the 20 years in Link, or is this something you might be able to share with some of us?
No, this is definitely not a Link concept. I mean, with a Link concept, you plan for the whole class, you have handouts, right? I noticed as a Link instructor that especially pre-literacy students had no kind of binder skills. They had no organizational skills. They'd just be stuck in upside down all over the place. And this is just an approach I got to after trying many, many different styles. So it's more structured. It's the opposite of kind of the conversation classes, which are more kind of free-flowing. This is actually a highly structured program. And I found it's interesting because it does start to teach them some organizational skills. So I organized the binder for them. It's different sections. So it's kind of probably a combination of their own learning goals and also what I assess that they might need as well, just from my own experience. So I try to cover 3 or 4 areas And I just use little sticky notes, and I'll put a number 1 on the first section. And then if they turn the page over, like we'll move the sticky note over. So the next volunteer, the next day, will know where to start as well. Because the volunteers change in each day. So I kind of tell the volunteers there's 4 little numbers there, right? And you spend kind of equal amount of time going through it. It also keeps it, because it's 2 hours, there's no break, it's very focused, it's quite intense actually. When you have a volunteer right with you, you're just totally focused and working the whole time. So that gives them some variety and also covers all the areas that they do need to work on. Yeah.
Thank you.
Would anyone like to share some final comments or thoughts to conclude the presentations? Well, I would. Wanted to give you a chance. So I had the opportunity to watch these presentations twice, once in the morning, once in the afternoon, which I feel very fortunate because when I watched them the second time, I picked up on different aspects of your programs that definitely address gaps and needs that our regular link programming does not. But one thing I would like to say is watching it twice, I also saw a lot of parallels. So both these programs are addressing similar needs, which to me, when I see repetition and I see it in different places, it means there's a high need for that. So I think there's a high need for these programs, and I thank you very much for sharing that information with us. So we're going to conclude this. Okay, I've messed this up, but okay. So thank you everyone for attending the sessions today, both in the morning and the afternoon. We've learned a lot from the amazing speakers. I know there were 4 different sessions. I'm excited to see the recordings. Or if you want to share with me what you've also learned. We are going to head back to the main room. There's going to be a short coffee break for about 15 minutes, and then we're going to do, I think it's called a resource roundup. But I think the speakers will stick around for a little while if you'd like to come up and speak with them individually. And thank you very much for attending our session.